There is a kind of person who can walk into a room and immediately feel the tension between two people who haven't said a single word to each other. They notice the slight tightness in someone's jaw, the way a friend laughs just a half second too late, the low hum of sadness underneath someone's perfectly fine smile. They feel it all, absorb it all, carry it all. And yet if you stop that same person in the middle of the day and ask them, "How are you feeling right now, truly? What is actually happening inside you?" they would pause. They would look at you with this beautiful searching expression, and then they would say, "I don't know, I think I'm okay, I'm fine, I guess." That is not a small thing, that is everything. And if that just described you, I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I'm about to tell you is going to change something in the way you see yourself. You are someone who lives, breathes, and practically bleeds emotional information. You are tuned in to the feelings of everyone around you at a frequency that most people can't even access. You sense when someone is lying even when they're smiling. You feel other people's grief in your own chest. You lie awake at night replaying a conversation, not because something was said to you, but because you could feel that something was left unsaid and it bothered you on behalf of the other person. You have probably been told your whole life that you are too sensitive, that you feel too much, that you need to toughen up, build walls, stop taking everything so personally. But here is the thing nobody ever told you, and this is the part that matters. Feeling deeply for others and being able to feel and name your own emotions are two completely different skills. And for most empaths, somewhere along the way, one of those skills got developed into a superpower while the other one quietly starved. Let's sit with that for a moment, because I don't want you to rush past it. You became so extraordinarily good at reading other people that you made a kind of unconscious trade-off. The more you directed your attention outward, the less practiced you became at directing it inward. And this wasn't weakness. It wasn't failure. In most cases, it was survival. It was the most logical thing you could have done, given the environment you grew up in or the relationships you found yourself in. But the result is something that psychologists actually have a name for, and it's called alexithymia. And before you panic about what that word means, let me tell you that it doesn't mean you're broken. It means something far more interesting than that. Alexithymia, in its clinical definition, refers to difficulty identifying and describing one's own emotional states. It exists on a spectrum, and while it's often studied in people who are described as emotionally detached or unfeeling, there is an enormous and largely overlooked population of people who experience a version of it, while simultaneously being among the most emotionally sensitive people alive. Empaths, highly sensitive people, people who feel everything but can't quite find words for what they themselves are going through. Doesn't that sound almost poetic and also deeply unfair? You are a person who can describe the emotional landscape of someone else's heartbreak with the precision of a poet, but when it comes to your own, you go quiet, you go foggy. You might feel something pressing against your ribs, something sitting heavy in your throat, something tight and unnamed in your gut, and when someone asks you to name it, you say, "I don't know, I'm just off today." Or you pivot immediately, you ask how they're doing instead, you make a joke, you redirect the entire conversation towards someone else's feelings, because honestly, that is so much more familiar and comfortable territory than sitting in the strange, unmapped land of your own interior. And here is what I want you to understand about why that happens. Because understanding the why is where everything begins to shift. When you grow up as a highly sensitive child, and many empaths did, you often learn very quickly that your own emotional experiences were either too much for the people around you, or simply less important. Maybe you were the emotional caretaker of a parent who was struggling. Maybe you were in a household where feelings weren't discussed, they were managed or suppressed or dismissed. Maybe you were the kid who cried at everything and was constantly told to stop being so dramatic, and so you learned to be quiet about what was happening inside you, even while your nervous system was picking up every frequency around you like a satellite dish that never gets turned off. What this creates over time is a fascinating and painful paradox. You become extremely skilled at emotional attunement toward others. You are deeply empathetic. You are extraordinarily caring. You can sense and respond to what people need before they even ask. But your own emotional world becomes this vast interior territory that you rarely visit, rarely map, rarely name out loud. Not because it isn't there. It is absolutely there, and it is enormous, and sometimes it erupts in ways that surprise even you. But because you were never given permission, never given the tools, never given the safe container to sit with your own feelings and simply say, this is what I am experiencing right now. Think about your childhood for a second, or your closest relationships. When you were upset, was the focus quickly shifted to fixing the situation? Was someone else's reaction to your emotions the thing that suddenly became the main event? Did you ever feel like your sadness made someone else sad in a way that made you feel responsible, and so you learned to tuck your sadness away to protect them? Did you ever notice that when you expressed a need, it somehow got tangled up in managing someone else's response to that need? So eventually it felt like less work to just not have the need at all? That is not just emotional suppression. That is the architecture of an empath who has been trained, gently or not so gently, to make their inner world small so that there is more room for everyone else's. And you have been doing this for so long that it no longer feels like a choice. It feels like personality. It feels like just who you are. You are the helper, the listener, the one who holds space, the one who intuits what everyone needs and quietly provides it. You are wonderful at this, by the way. People love you for this. They feel so seen around you, so held, so understood. But here is the question I want you to sit with, and I'm asking it with complete love. Who holds you? Who asks you how you're really feeling and then stays long enough to hear the whole complicated answer? And when they do ask, do you even know how to answer? Most empaths, when pushed, can describe their emotions in terms of what triggered them or in terms of how they affected someone else, but they struggle deeply to describe the emotion itself, in their own body, in the present moment, for their own sake. They'll say, I was upset because they made me feel like I wasn't important. Notice how that sentence is almost entirely about the other person's action and perceived intention. Very rarely does an empath say, I felt a deep, aching loneliness when that happened, and underneath that was a kind of old grief that I've been carrying for years. That level of self-directed emotional articulation often feels almost foreign, almost too self-indulgent, almost too focused on the self. And there it is, that word, self-indulgent. I want to gently challenge you on something that might feel uncomfortable. Many empaths have a deep, quiet, barely conscious belief that focusing on their own emotions is somehow selfish. That naming what they feel, sitting with it, prioritizing it, giving it space and language and attention takes something away from others. As if emotional resources are a zero-sum game, and every moment you spend tending to your own interior is a moment you're not giving to someone who needs you. This belief is so deeply embedded in most empaths that it doesn't even feel like a belief. It feels like truth. It feels like virtue. And on the surface, it looks like selflessness. But I need you to hear this clearly, because I mean it with every word. It is not selflessness. It is self-abandonment, dressed up as generosity. Let me say that again, because it deserves to land. Self-abandonment dressed up as generosity. You cannot give from a place you haven't visited in years. You cannot offer real emotional presence to others when you are emotionally absent from yourself. The empathy you extend outward is extraordinary, yes, but it is running on something, and that something is you, and you are not an inexhaustible resource. You are a person, a full, complex, layered, feeling, needing, sometimes struggling person. And every time you sidestep your own emotional experience to tend to someone else's, you are not actually helping more. You are slowly, quietly hollowing yourself out. And the cruel irony is this, because empaths are so attuned to others, when they are running on empty, when they are overwhelmed, when they are sad or angry or deeply lonely, they don't always recognize those signals in themselves, the way they would instantly recognize them in someone else. They push through, they override the signals. They tell themselves they're fine, they make themselves smaller and smaller, until one day they find themselves completely depleted, and they genuinely cannot understand why, because they haven't been paying attention to themselves long enough to see it coming. You see it in others, you miss it in yourself. That is the specific heartbreak of being an empath who has lost the thread back to their own emotional experience. Now I want to talk about what this actually feels like in daily life, because I think sometimes psychology can feel too abstract, too theoretical, and what you need is to hear your actual experience named out loud, so you know someone gets it. You walk away from a social interaction and you feel something you can't quite name, a kind of heaviness, a buzzing in your body. You tell yourself you're tired, you make a cup of tea, you scroll your phone, You do everything except sit with what just happened in your own nervous system. Because sitting with it feels uncomfortable in a way you can't explain, and you're much more practiced at moving through feelings than you are at staying inside them. Or you feel a flicker of anger, and it scares you a little. Because empaths often have a complicated relationship with their own anger. Anger feels aggressive. Anger feels unkind. Anger for many empaths was never safe to express growing up. So instead of sitting with the anger and asking it what it's trying to protect you from, you convert it into something more familiar. You feel guilty. You wonder if you're overreacting. You make excuses for the person who hurt you. You empathize with their perspective so thoroughly that your own legitimate pain gets dissolved in the acid of your understanding of them. Do you see what you're doing there? You are doing to yourself what no one else should ever get to do to you. You are dismissing your own emotional experience in real time. You are the person who makes you feel unseen. That's not easy to hear, I know, but it is important. Here's something else. Empaths often describe their emotions in physical sensations rather than emotional vocabulary. They say, I feel heavy, or I feel tight in my chest, or I feel like I can't breathe. And yes, those are real valid experiences, but notice that they are not emotional words. Heavy is a physical sensation. Tight is a physical sensation. These are the body's translations of emotions that haven't been given language yet, and the body has to translate because the mind hasn't been asked to do that work often enough. This is not a criticism. This is a doorway, because it means that you already feel the emotions fully in your body, even when you can't name them. The sensation is there, the experience is there. What's missing is the bridge between the felt sense in your body and the emotional language in your mind. And that bridge can be built. It can absolutely be built. But it requires you to make a decision that might feel countercultural to everything you have been taught about yourself and what love means. It requires you to decide that your emotions deserve the same quality of attention you give to everyone else's. Not after everyone else is taken care of. Not when there's leftover space and time. Not when you've fixed everyone's problems and soothed everyone's anxieties and listened to everyone's stories. Now, first, or at least equally, this is what it looks like in practice, and it is simpler than you might think. The next time you notice something happening in your body, that heaviness, that tightness, that strange buzzing in your chest, instead of immediately moving toward distraction or toward someone else's needs, pause. Just pause and ask yourself one question. Not why do I feel this? Not is it valid? Just what is this? Stay curious. Stay gentle. Give the sensation in your body a chance to translate itself into something your mind can hold on to. Maybe it's loneliness. Maybe it's a specific kind of loneliness that has been there since childhood. Maybe it's grief. Maybe it's anger that has been waiting patiently in a corner for years. Maybe it's a quiet, aching longing for someone to ask about you the way you ask about everyone else. Whatever it is, it deserves to be named, not fixed, not immediately solved, just named. Because naming is the first act of self-respect. The psychological research on this is actually profound. When you name an emotion, when you give it language, the emotional intensity of it decreases. Not because you've suppressed it, but because you've integrated it. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for language and meaning-making, begins to regulate the amygdala, which is where raw emotional signals originate. Naming is not a small thing. It is literally neurologically regulating. It is how you move from being flooded by an emotion to being in relationship with it. And for empaths who already have highly sensitive, highly activated nervous systems, this kind of emotional naming practice isn't just healing. It is in many ways coming home to a house that has been locked up for years. There is something else I want you to hear, and this is the part that I want to sit with you on for a moment, because it matters more than anything else I've said. The reason you became so good at reading other people, the reason your emotional antennae are so finely tuned, the reason you can walk into a room and feel the invisible weather of everyone inside it, that did not come from nowhere. For most empaths, that skill was developed in environments where reading other people was necessary, where attuning to someone else's mood meant you could prepare yourself, where sensing tension before it exploded kept you safe, or kept the peace, or kept someone else from falling apart. Your emotional sensitivity was not a gift that came in from the outside. It was forged. It was built by your nervous system in response to your environment. It was your intelligence responding to what your world required of you, and that deserves enormous compassion. Not pity, not pathologizing, not the framing of something is wrong with you. Just deep, full compassion for the child or the younger you, who learned to put everyone else first because that was what love looked like, or what safety looked like, or what being needed felt like when other forms of connection weren't available. But here's what I need you to gently reckon with. That chapter is not the final chapter. What you learned in one context, that it is safer to be attuned to others than to yourself, does not have to be the operating system you run on for the rest of your life. That was a brilliant adaptation. It is not a permanent identity. And you are allowed, you are more than allowed, you are deeply invited to learn something new. You are allowed to be known. Not just the version of you that takes care of everyone. Not just the you that listens and soothes and gives and forgives and carries. You, the full you. The you that gets tired. The you that sometimes resents. The you that has needs that haven't been met in longer than you can remember. The you that cries in the car on the way home from helping someone else because somewhere in the giving, you brushed up against your own loneliness and you didn't know what to do with it. That you is not too much. That you is not a burden. That you is not the unglamorous version of your empathy that needs to be hidden. That you is the whole point. Because here is what empathy actually is at its most complete, most powerful form. It is not just the ability to feel someone else's world. It is the ability to feel your own world with enough depth and honesty that you can truly meet someone else in theirs. Real empathy, the kind that heals rather than just helps, comes from people who know their own emotional landscape well enough to be present in someone else's without losing themselves in it. What you have now is extraordinary. Don't misunderstand me. But what you could have, what is waiting for you on the other side of learning to name your own emotions, is even more extraordinary. A kind of empathy that is rooted, grounded, boundaried, and sustainable. Empathy that doesn't deplete you. Empathy that comes from fullness rather than from the constant draining of your own reserves. That is what is available to you when you decide that your emotional life matters as much as everyone else's. So I want to leave you with this, not as a task, not as a homework assignment, not as one more thing to do for someone else's benefit, but as an invitation offered with complete warmth to yourself. Tonight, at some point, just check in, not on anyone else, on you. Put your hand on your chest if that helps. Take one breath and ask, quietly and without pressure, what am I actually feeling right now? And then stay there. Don't fix it. Don't rationalize it. Don't redirect it. Don't dismiss it. Just let it be there, witnessed by you for once. Because you have spent so much of your life making sure other people feel seen, it is long past time to see yourself